On the 30th November 2023, Russia's Supreme Court declared what it called International LGBT Movement an extremist organization. This means that queer people could face lengthy prison sentences if deemed to be part of this so-called organization, which of course doesn't exist as a formal entity, effectively criminalizing queer people's rights to live as their true selves. Russia's reputation as a homophobic country is well known in the West. LGA Europe, which ranks countries based on how the laws and policies of each country impacts on the life of LGBTQ+ people, ranked Russia 46 out of 49 European countries in 2023 annual survey. But how did we get there? In this video, we'll delve into the history of the legal persecution faced by LGBTQ+ people in Russia, societal attitudes that go alongside this, and the regional variations in the situation for queer people across Russia, as well as the horrific consequences of Russia's homophobic and transphobic laws. Finally, we'll talk about what you can do to help LGBTQ+ people in this situation. Russia has a long history of legal persecution against LGBTQ+ people, which of course extends further back in time than to the 21st century. In the Soviet Union, male homosexuality was criminalized before being legalized in 1993. Since 2006, various regions in Russia criminalized the so-called promotion of homosexuality to children, and this was enacted as a nationwide law in 2013, commonly known as a gay propaganda law. In December 2022, an amendment to the 2013 law was signed, extending the ban on propaganda of non-traditional sexual relationships to all age groups in Russia, with references to LGBT people being deleted from books, films, adverts, and TV shows. New legislation was passed in June 2023, banning gender-affirming medical care and the ability to change gender marker in the official documents for transgender people, as well as prohibiting them from adopting children and automatically annulling marriages if one of the partners changed their gender marker. Finally, on November 30th, 2023, Russia's Supreme Court banned the LGBT movement as an extremist organization, effectively criminalizing LGBTQ+ people and organizations. This move represents a significant escalation in the Russian government's effort to suppress LGBTQ rights and activism. You may have noticed a rapid succession of laws targeting the LGBTQ+ community being drawn up since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. That's no accident. This legislation has been used to foster a sense of national identity in the Russian people at the expense of LGBTQ+ people's fundamental rights. The Russian government's focus on traditional values seeks to maintain a sense of moral superiority in the face of Western influence, or so they claim. In reality, this politicized homophobia draws symbolic boundaries between Russian culture and the more liberal West, which has thrown its support behind Ukraine, and constructs an enemy to deepen division: LGBTQ+ people. Through the infringement of the enemy's rights, they hope to bolster national identity and religious sentiment. A poll conducted by the Levada Center in October 2021 showed the effects of this discourse: a marked polarization of public opinion in regard to LGBTQ+ people. Between 2013 and 2021, the number of people who would deny adults the right to enter in a consensual same-sex relationships rose. But at the same time, the number of people who recognize this right increased slightly as well. In terms of personal attitudes towards, as they say in this research, LGBTI+ people, there was an increase in neutrality and friendliness, and a drop in negative attitudes. But again, simultaneously, there was an increase in feelings of repulsion and fear. These contrasts show the increasing divide in Russian society, which also exists between the old and the young, as showed in the graph. It's important to remember, however, that this data is from 2021. It's now much more difficult to get accurate data on public attitudes in Russia, although it is reasonable to assume that these divides have deepened along with the government's increasing repressions. Both Russia's political repression and hostile public opinion have had and continue to have tragic human costs. There are countless stories of queer individuals and organizations who have been persecuted in Russia in recent years. We'll focus on just a few examples that are illustrative of the scale of the problem. A warning that the next section of this video discusses explicit violence against LGBTQ+ people. According to a poll by the Russian LGBT network in October 2021, 78.4% of respondents have faced violence or discrimination in connection with their gender identity and/or sexual orientation. Almost 1/3 of all cases of violence originated with members of homophobic and transphobic organizations. The poll showed that LGBTQ+ people everywhere must hide their identity or orientation. Almost 1/4 of respondents were involved in cases where their personal data was used illegally for blackmail or extortion, and the rights of 14.8% were violated at work. The Human Rights Watch report, License to Harm, Violence and Harassment Against LGBT People and Activists in Russia, is based on dozens of detailed interviews with LGBTQ people and activists in 16 cities across Russia who experienced attacks of aggressive harassment because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. LGBT people describe being beaten, abducted, humiliated, and called pedophiles or perverts in some cases by homophobic vigilante groups, and in others by strangers on the subway, on the streets, at nightclubs, at cafes, and in one case, at a job interview. Most of those interviewed said that these problems has intensified since the enactment of the gay propaganda law in 2013. Even in Russia's more liberal cities, the situation is acute, and many people feel that they cannot openly express their identities. In 2019, a Russian LGBTQ activist, Elena Grigorieva, was fatally stabbed in St. Petersburg, one of Russia's biggest and most socially progressive cities, after her name was listed on a website that encourages people to hunt LGBTQ activists. According to friends and colleagues, Grigorieva was worried about her safety after she found her name and personal information listed on that site. Another St. Petersburg resident, Sergei Dyatlov, was attacked by a group of 4 people on his way to a nightclub on May 8, 2021. Paramedic diagnosed Sergei with a concussion, hematomas, contusions, and abrasions. On April 15, 2022, a criminal case was opened against the photographer Sergei Kondratyev, prompted by a complaint about an 8-second video on Sergei's Instagram page. The video shows him kissing his partner in front of St. Petersburg Holy Trinity Cathedral. The entire team of Coming Out, the St. Petersburg-based initiatives working for equal rights for LGBTQ+ people, left Russia on April 2022, stating they could no longer guarantee the safety of their team if they stayed there. In Moscow, in 2019, Roman Yedalov and his partner Evgeny Yefimov were waiting for a cab in the city center when a man attacked them, wounding Yefimov and fatally stabbing Yedalov. Several people witnessed the killing, and a CCTV camera also recorded a gruesome scene. Authorities opened a murder case, but without raising the hate motive. The jury found the defendant guilty of the wound to Yefimov, but that he should not be held criminally responsible for Yedalov's death. The lawyer representing Yedalov's mothers and partner suggested that the man's sexual orientations may have discouraged the members of the jury from viewing the perpetrator as a murderer. In other areas of Russia, the situation for queer people is even worse. Continuing state-sponsored atrocities and persecutions committed in Chechnya in recent years has gained international attention. But silence envelopes the government of Russia. Novaya Gazeta journalist and the Russian LGBT network revealed evidence of extrajudicial killings of LGBTQ+ people committed by Chechen security forces, but no criminal cases were ever opened against the perpetrators. And, in spite of public testimony and the complaints of real people, the Russian authorities said they could not confirm evidence of the crime. In 2019, the Russian LGBT network helped over 140 gay Chechens immigrate to European countries and Canada. In North Caucasus, illegal detentions, kidnappings, arrests, torture, and killing of LGBTQ+ people committed with the involvement of security officials has been documented. The North Caucasian Federal District ranks first in terms of the frequency of physical violence committed by the relatives, colleagues, and classmates of LGBTQ+ people. The life of LGBTQ+ people in this region are also at high risk because of so-called conversion therapy. Across the country, Russian law enforcement officials have refused to investigate these assaults and violence against LGBT individuals and activists. In 25% of the cases in the Human Rights Watch report, the police did not accept the victim's statement, and the staff at law enforcement agencies often supported homophobic attitudes and actively fought LGBTI+ activism. The law enforcement and judicial system are not only unable to protect the rights of these people, but in fact frequently act as agents of discrimination and violence themselves. By enacting legislation aimed at preserving traditional values, including homophobic laws, the Russian government is attempting to portray itself as a leading defender of traditional values, aligning with the Russian government's international and domestic policy goals and political strategy. Cultural and intellectual manipulation through disinformation and propaganda is a primary weapon in the Kremlin's arsenal, providing the political elite with a state ideology that justifies abandoning international norms, repelling Western criticism of current Russian policies, and maintaining power. This political manipulation comes at the expense of the human rights, dignity, and safety of LGBTQ+ people, and is likely to worsen significantly in the near future. It is vital that the world does not look away from the situation facing Russian queer people in 2023. There are still organizations trying desperately to assist LGBTQ+ people in Russia, and their workload has only increased following the Russian government's most recent legislations that we just talked about. Please consider donating to one of these excellent organizations linked in the description below, as they need all the help they can get. We would particularly like to highlight the work of Queer Svit, a London-based, Black queer-run independent team of volunteers from all over the world. They help LGBTQ+ and BAME people from Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, and other EECA countries whose lives have been affected by war and/or political repressions get to safety by providing consultations, purchasing tickets, finding free accommodation, and providing humanitarian aid. Thanks for watching. If you found this information valuable, please consider sharing it to spread awareness, and subscribe to the Russian Democratic Society YouTube channel for future videos. Goodbye.